UnitedHealth Group stock yesterday was up over 4% when the entire market was down. A lot of big stocks in the market have been down almost 10% this week. And we're going to go over the reasons why. And no, it is not Warren Buffett. He is not buying the stock yet. There was a rumor out there, a screenshot, but I'm going to show you the proof exactly why the stock went up with some other healthcare stocks. At about 8:21 in the morning, that is when all three of the big healthcare stocks related to this for Medicare Advantage, they all ran up right at the same time. So the Warren Buffett rumor, which was just a screenshot and someone had created it, and I really think it's probably someone that is a short or someone just to discredit the move that had already happened about 8. Then we saw this rumor going around and it was about warrants. So I highly doubt that this comes into fruition, and we'll look and see if there's any filings and refresh it, but I doubt that's happened. But you can see pretty much all at the same time here. Now, what really happened at this time, a research, about 3 or 4 articles that they had written, Wolfe Research, they released it, and it's about the Medicare Advantage, the outlook. So they were kind of bearish on the outlook for 2026, but they've kind of changed their stance on it. So because the entire sector compared to the S&P is really down at a 30-year low nearly recently, we've seen a lot of potential money from a lot of these gains potentially coming back to safety, stocks like this that are very low and they're still making a lot of free cash flow and paying a dividend. Not at risk for bankruptcy at all. Like I showed you in my last videos, this litigation I think is going to end like it did before. This is not the first time this has happened. And right now, we've got some really golden swans that we're going to talk about also with this. But I really think that that was put out there by the bears or discredit this type of run. The pre-market, it was almost up 1.5%, but with the market pulling back, we'll see what happens, see if the bulls can win today. This is breaking, and one of the reasons why some of the pharmaceutical stocks are down, we talked about it on the last video about why this is such a golden swan. And we will listen to the president here. And this is massive because he likes to get things done and he's trying to get a deal to lower drug prices. And this is what he had to say.
I did something with Switzerland the other day. I spoke to their prime minister. The woman was nice, but she didn't want to listen. And they paid essentially no tariffs. And I said, we have a $41 billion deficit with you, madam. I didn't know her. I said, we have a $41 billion deficit. And you want to pay 1% tariffs. You wanted 1%. I said, you're not going to pay 1%. We lose, because I view deficit as loss. You have some people, by the way, I think
pharmaceuticals are a big issue with Switzerland. I think.
Well, I'll go into pharmaceuticals. Yeah. They make a fortune with pharmaceuticals, and they make our pharmaceuticals in China and Ireland and everything else. And within the next week or so, we're going to be announcing tariffs on specifically. This is a separate class than the 15% tariffs on sort of everything. But on pharmaceuticals, we'll be putting a initially small tariff on pharmaceuticals, but in 1 year, 1.5 years maximum, it's going to go to 150%, and then it's going to go to 250% because we want pharmaceuticals made in our country.
So this is really, really bullish. I think people are still sleeping on this. And that other thing, this is also potentially going to help these other companies as well. UnitedHealth, I think, Group is going to be one of the biggest beneficiaries of this because there's a lot of cost. And think of it this way. A lot of people in the comments you guys were asking, and this is the best way to think about it. A car insurance company, they don't want people to get in wrecks. They want your car to last a long time. They don't want your car breaking down and then canceling your insurance. They actually would rather you keep paying your premiums, right? Same thing. And, if they have to pay high costs to repair your car because you wrecked it, obviously they're going to incur these costs and they're not going to do as well. Well, if you look at some of the drug prices, we've seen it last time. Some of these are just ridiculous prices per month supply in USD for some of these medicines. And really, they've already got these markups like crazy. And then America ends up paying it. So what they're going to try to do is get, obviously, a lot of the other countries that do not pay much, and actually, first world countries that have money, they're going to pay a little more and we'll pay less. But what that'll do for Americans, and obviously healthcare companies, they're going to drop the prices and they're going to save a lot of money. That means the free cash flow for UnitedHealth Group especially with raising rates, because they should have done a lot more. They're going to have phenomenal outlook as well as the numbers. Like right now we're at like a 25 billion trailing 12 months. So it's like really 25, 24. The outlook was dropped to like 16, but really I think it's going to be a lot more with raising the premiums. And, you have a potential too with the market looking like this for the past just, couple days. We're starting to see some of the big stocks, really strong, stocks out there drop a little bit. And it's like the flight to safety might happen. And a lot of people, they're starting to think that rates are going to come down pretty quick. I think that they will. And then that's when you really see a lot of the 7 trillion, the money market funds, some of that could come into the stock market. And where would you buy? Would you be buying at all-time highs, 200-300 PE stocks? Or are you going to buy something at a 2020 low when they make almost $160+ billion? Like, UnitedHealth Group. This thing, I think, was to discredit this move, to kind of just put a lot of FUD out there. Just know that funds have been caught and, for fomenting, and some of the biggest names have even talked about it. They do this on purpose. I don't know if this was a professional, but it could very well have been. There's no filings specifically for Warren Buffett. I honestly think that, this is discredited. It's not probably a 5% chance. I think Warren Buffett, we see a filings, maybe less than that. But overall, I think it does fit the category of value that he likes. And, I think he has bought it before. I think it was like 2006, just like 1 million shares or something. But the fact that the previous CEO is now back in charge and a new CFO, I mean, that's a good thing. It's these CFO and CEO are not going to be the ones, they're not the ones going to be indicted, right, for this. And I think the big thing is it's just a sector-wide problem as well. Other companies have had issues as well with the cost. It's not just them. I think, a few other companies released today their earnings and in the sector, and they're experiencing high costs too. We're talking about the main reason of this is not just the prices of drugs, which is a big portion of it, but it's also a lot of pent-up demand. So when we were buying Carnival Cruise back in 2022, there was all that pent-up demand to go on a cruise. People wanted to travel. So it all came at an inflection point when they were able to travel again. They were getting booked up. People were paying a lot of, way high prices than they normally would have just to get on, a cruise at a good, good room. So, it shot back up. We were buying at 6 and this thing shot back up. Now it's like near 30 now, right? So the same thing I think is going to happen here. They're going to adjust the prices. The pent-up demand of surgery is what really happened for a lot of these companies. And UnitedHealth Group, was going through such a hard time, and a lot of institutions sold. So we're getting, new filings coming in, obviously no Buffett, but there are some buys. It's nothing out of the ordinary for a very, big dividend type stock, big company. We're probably going to maybe see a 1% to 2%, I think, drop in institutions. That's what that big volume was. We've already seen a few drop off here, just in the last like 5 or 6 months. And leading into last year, there were some drops already, because the investigation, I think a lot of people kind of thought that's where all this was headed with the new administration. But a lot of this is, like I said, very bullish. You got to really kind of step back and look at the entire market and not just look at the sector, but where's money going to flow? And the market long-term, like we've seen the market long-term, it's going to go up. The company's going to bounce back. It's no different than a Meta, like we talked about in the previous video, when they're still ongoing their litigation investigation right now. And Wells Fargo, financial crime going on over there, and they made it. So right now, the pre-market, it's going to open up in a little less than 2 hours, and it's down a little bit, barely. There was some volume, some buying volume coming in. But one other thing I want to look at is you start to see this candle, the volume, one of the big things. I'm thinking if we go into the full month chart, you can see that was the best. The full month was around 253 million. That was the full month of June, not the weekly. So this is already, a few days in. I think that the market's starting to realize that this Big Pharma war, in a sense, it's not really a PBM war, which a lot of people thought that, yes, there's going to be some cutbacks and things, but they're going to adjust their rates, and UnitedHealth Group is going to have big upside when these costs are cut as well. And the headwinds for the PBM for UnitedHealth Group, I think from what I've looked into, it's probably going to be about $1 billion, right? So about $1 billion versus some of the other companies. And then the fact that if they do get these costs cut for these pharmaceutical companies making deals with President Trump, which I think is going to happen. I think there is an announcement today. I don't necessarily think that we're going to see an announcement, pharmaceutical companies making a deal. I think if anything, it's probably going to be next week when we hear about these new tariffs from these imported pharmaceutical companies, right? That's going to be an issue. So like we're already starting to see, I'm starting to see myself, like some of the tariffs, like I bought a charger literally out of Hong Kong, and I think it's probably going to be an extra like $70 that I'm gonna have to pay like DHL. So that's unfortunate, right? That we have to pay these. But as far as I think, yes, rates will go up, but I think right now with UnitedHealth Group, what's going to be long-term better is going to be getting these prices down. And then when they're making them in America, some of these medicines, they can get the price down. Some of the markups we've seen, people go to prison for this stuff, 9,000% markups on some of these. And I know specifically, medicines that my wife takes and like that, they've gone down, especially when they start making generic versions of it. The prices will go down. And that's the whole game plan. Mark Cuban's also in this, costplusdrugs.com. You can actually get a lot of drugs, your prescription for pretty much, I've seen some that were thousands of dollars, get them down to like $8-9 for like 2-3 month supply even. Yeah, I think that's kind of where we're going, getting these prices down. Companies are going to need to really kind of switch up their game. I think a lot of it's going to be more on the health side, like losing weight. This is going to be great for a company like UnitedHealth Group. And we see this volume. I want to see another one of these green candles, and hopefully we can, kind of say this was a double bottom around here, right? I didn't want it to get down here to 180, 170, 180, COVID type hysteria, right? I think the only time really it get back down into here is if there was like major litigation going on. The CEO was in there getting grilled. Maybe people could sell it down to that. And then obviously if the market pulls back, because we're still at a pretty record high, right? For the entire market, looking at the S&P 500 to the sector. Like we said, there's that little green coming up right now, but we're still so far back, right? We're so far back. Looking back at everyone's pretty much putting their money into the S&P 500, those types of companies versus, this sector. And we've seen that pull back. But you can see here, like I said, these other stocks, some of the big ones, they actually did gain. Let me know, guys, do you guys think that UnitedHealth Group is found that bottom, that literal double bottom coming in here? Or are we going to see some headwinds coming up? Let me know down below what you think the price target's going to be by December of this year. I'm really curious to what you guys think. And if we are going to have a massive run up because of these companies, the pharmaceutical companies making deals and lowering prices. I mean, just the outlook, right? They're going to have to revise their outlook. Wolfe Research, they're going to have to revise their outlook. I think their outlook was like 330 for, this company. So UnitedHealth Group 2026, like they said today in their report, that it looks like it's going to be a lot better. They're going to not face as much headwinds as they thought. And that's going to be actually a lot more positive.